Not affected by the previous play, not affected by the scoreboard. But stay with what you need to do to be all you can be and be relentless to continue to play. Every time we play in a national championship game, everybody wants to talk about the national championship. We got a chance to win the national championship. We've been in 5 of them. We won 5 times. You know what I told every team before we played them? I don't want anybody to talk about the national championship. We're not talking about that. I don't want you to think about that. What I want you to do is think about you're going to play the best player you played against all year long. And you need to go play against that guy for 60 minutes in the game. And that's what you need to focus on, and that's what you need to prepare for. What do I need to do to dominate the competition, which is the best I played against all year? So let's go practice and let's go play and get ready to do that against the best we played against all year.
Hey guys, in your opinion, really fast, I have to go, but real fast. And then like they're actually stopped and you go, actually, you're really cute, who are you? Now that you've intent is, we say, being clear about who you are and what you want, being clear that you're a man and she's a woman, making sure that it is that type of interaction, not a platonic interaction that's going nowhere. Freedom from outcome, a lot of people get confused when they put intent and freedom from outcome together. Freedom from outcome means not caring about the result of the interaction so much, not being attached to it, being willing to fail, being willing to walk away from any particular girl, and not getting too caught up in trying to make it work. What you find a lot of times in game is that when you are trying to make it work, you're coming off as having an agenda, and that can be creepy, that can be needy, and that can work against you, right? But there's this paradox of freedom from outcome along with intent, which is something that I'll speak to a lot in the next hour or so. Rockstar, he's putting himself in front of a crowd, like a huge audience, and he's performing. He has 10,000 or 1 million people watching him. Put in tough social situations, when I've been under the scrutiny of the tribe, I've received positive feedback. Right? So far, I walked in, gave a false time constraint because she'd already rejected me before. I didn't want to go in super hard or surprised her. And what did I do? I misinterpreted her surprise as a compliment. Misinterpreted it as though she was overwhelmed, attracted by me, that sort of thing, right? So I'm just
player to adhere to touch move. Once you touch a piece, you must move it. Give no quarter and ask for none. Learn from your losses. The Cuban world champion Capablanca admitted that he only learned from his losses. Record all your offhand games and go over them later to try to find where you make your mistakes if you didn't already know. You aren't likely to lose the same way twice, and you also retain a permanent record of your own progress. And lastly, study. Play over recent games of Masters in books and magazines. Combine this study with actual play against strong opponents. And of course, spend as much spare time at the game as you can.
10 seconds a move. It's really not quite like 5-minute chess, because if the game goes longer, 40 moves, 60 moves, the game can be somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes long. So it allows for a little more reflection and value. And Fischer just felt he played thousands of games with that.
Between tasks, there's a setup cost. The brain has to clear out the current problem, load in the new problem, retrieve the relevant context, and rebuild the mental model. That takes energy and time. If you're switching every hour, you're spending a huge fraction of your day just loading and unloading mental states. The really productive people, they don't do this. They work on one thing, maybe 2 if they're related, for as long as the problem demands. They let the brain build up a full, rich model of the problem space. And once that model is built, the brain can do something remarkable. It can work on the problem even when you're not consciously thinking about it. You've experienced this. You work hard on something, get stuck, go for a walk, and suddenly the solution appears. That's not magic. That's the brain continuing to process in the background. But it can only do this if you've given it enough focused time to build the model in the first place. Here's the second principle. Real work happens in bursts, not in steady streams. The brain has different modes of operation. There's a focused mode where you're actively manipulating ideas, and there's a diffuse mode where connections form more loosely. Both are necessary. Neither is optional. Think about reading a difficult technical book. You can't just read for 6 hours straight and expect to understand it. What actually works is reading intensely for an hour, then doing something completely different, walking, washing dishes, staring at the ceiling. During that diffuse time, the brain is consolidating what you learned, finding connections, moving information into longer-term storage. But people don't structure their work this way. They think breaks are wasted time, so they push through, staying in focused mode until their brain simply refuses to cooperate anymore. And then they wonder why they're exhausted but haven't learned anything. The truly productive approach is different. Work intensely on one problem for 60 to 90 minutes. Not sort of working, not working while distracted, but really focusing every available mental resource on that single problem. Then stop. Completely stop. Do something that requires no mental effort at all. What happens during that break is critical. The brain reviews what just happened. It strengthens the important connections and weakens the irrelevant ones. It finds patterns you didn't consciously notice. When you come back to the work, you're not just rested, you actually understand the problem better than you did before the break. Now here's where it gets interesting. The third principle: the brain is remarkably good at knowing what's important, but only if you let it. There's a natural filtering system that sorts problems by urgency and significance. But this system gets overridden when you try to force everything to be equally important.
What matters is distinguishing between pleasure-seeking and curiosity-following. Pleasure-seeking is checking social media, binging television, any activity designed to produce dopamine without effort. Curiosity-following is engaging with questions that genuinely perplex you, even when the engagement is difficult. Feynman's plate calculation required work. He had to derive equations, check mathematics, think carefully. But it was effortless in the sense that he wanted to do it. Stakes enough to actually think clearly. The play wasn't a vacation from real work. The play was how real work happens. He later said, "Physics is like sex. Sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it." This principle extends far beyond hours, maybe days, occasionally weeks, but not the months and years required for genuinely difficult breakthroughs. Feynman spent 2 years in that post-war depression, trying to will himself into productivity. It didn't work because it couldn't work. Willpower is a terrible engine for creative intellectual work. But when you follow curiosity, when you work on problems because they genuinely interest you in the moment, you tap into a renewable resource. Feynman spent the next 40 years doing physics not because he should, but because he couldn't help himself. The difference in output is exponential. His Nobel Prize-winning work on quantum understanding that destroys most talented people before they achieve anything remarkable. The misunderstanding works like this. Society teaches us that important work feels like work. Significant achievements require discipline, sacrifice, forcing yourself through resistance. The path to excellence is paved with obligation. You identify valuable problems, then motivate yourself to solve them through willpower and responsibility. This logic sounds reasonable. It's completely backwards. What Feynman discovered in that cafeteria was that the causality runs the opposite direction. The spinning plate wasn't important, which is exactly why it was important. By removing the pressure of significance, he reconnected with the intrinsic motivation that makes sustained excellence possible. He didn't decide to work on quantum electrodynamics and then force himself to care. He played with physics until the play naturally led him to quantum electrodynamics, at which point it wasn't work anymore. The distinction matters desperately. When you force yourself to work,
you feel really bad. And now if you lose more, you already feel maximally bad emotionally. So losing $2,000 versus losing $4,000 emotionally feels kind of the same. Times I get a phone number, I'm only going to meet up with that girl like maybe 30% of the time. Like it's a huge, huge, huge drop off, right? Less so in day game, more so in night game, and depends on the situation a little bit and stuff like that. But like figure more than half the girls, at least, you're going to probably lose from phone number to getting them on a date, right? And then once I get the girl on a date, I'm going to close like, again, 85, 90%, something like that, right? So the we take the girl home, and half the time it's going to fail to the point she doesn't even give you a phone number, it would still be worth it. You need to understand that that's still a statistically worthwhile risk. That's still the right play to do, right? And that's hard to do because emotionally you want to win, right? When you get a phone number, you walk away like, oh, that girl liked me.
Start with one. Execute it consistently for several weeks until it becomes automatic. Then add another. The first system is now running on autopilot, so you have mental resources available to establish the second one. Build your life this way, one system at a time, and after a year or two, you'll have a collection of automated behaviors that produce enormous cumulative results. Here's where this gets interesting. Once you have several systems running, they start to interact. The system where you exercise every morning gives you more energy, which makes the system where you study in the evening easier to maintain. The system where you read for 20 minutes before bed improves your thinking, which makes your work system more effective. This is compound interest, but moment. Right now, you can decide to open a textbook. You can decide to write a paragraph. You can decide to do 20 push-ups. The immediate action is always within your power. Systems shift your attention from outcomes to processes. Instead of asking, "Have I achieved the goal?" you ask, "Did I execute the system today?" And that second question has a clear, immediate answer. Either you did it or you didn't. There's no ambiguity, no waiting around for future results. This changes the psychology completely. With goals, you're always measuring yourself against something you haven't accomplished yet. You're always falling short until the moment you succeed, and that moment might be months or years away. With systems, you succeed every single day you execute the behavior. The success is immediate and tangible. This isn't just philosophical. It affects motivation in a concrete way. The brain releases dopamine not when you achieve distant goals, but when you make progress toward them. Every time you execute your system, you're creating a small win, and small systems free up mental resources that goals consume. When you have a goal, part of your mind is constantly monitoring your progress, worrying about whether you're doing enough, feeling anxious about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. This monitoring takes energy. With a system, there's nothing to monitor except whether you did today's routine. Either you studied physics for 20 minutes this morning, or you didn't. That's it. No need to calculate how many more years of study you need. No need to compare yourself to a book. I want to be in better shape. These are descriptions, nothing more. And here's the peculiar thing. The brain doesn't know what to do with descriptions. The brain works with actions, with sequences, with patterns of behavior that can be executed right now. When someone says, "I want to learn physics," they're holding a photograph of a destination. But there's no map, there's no sequence of steps. There's just this image of being somewhere other than where they are. And then they wonder why they're not making progress. This confusion runs down. It wasn't there. When you find gaps, resist the urge to immediately look up the answer. Sit with the confusion for a moment. Think about what specifically is unclear. Is it a concept you don't understand? A connection you can't see? A step in the logic you can't follow? Identifying exactly what you don't understand is itself a profound form of understanding. Go back to your materials with a mission. You're not rereading everything. You're hunting for specific answers to specific questions. This makes the second pass through material incredibly efficient. You know what you're looking for. Your mind is primed to grasp it. Then explain it again. The second time through will be better, smoother, more connected. But you'll probably still find weak spots. That's fine. That's the process. That's completely natural. You simply notice it. No criticism, no frustration. Just, "Oh, I was thinking about something else." And then you gently return to what you were doing. The gentleness is crucial. Harsh self-criticism creates emotional turbulence that makes concentration harder, not easier. Think of it this way. If you're trying to balance something delicate, say a pencil on your finger, you don't succeed by gripping harder or moving your hand violently. You succeed by making very small, gentle adjustments. You stay relaxed and responsive. The same principle applies to mental balance. The lighter your touch, the better the control. Now, there's a deeper layer to this. The reason most people struggle so much with their minds isn't just that they're using the wrong techniques. It's that they've developed a hostile relationship. Understand and push it to extremes. What happens if this number gets very large? Very small? Zero? Negative? What if you reverse the process? What if you change one variable? Suppose you're learning about levers. Don't just memorize the formula for mechanical advantage. Play with it. What happens if you make the fulcrum very close to the load? The force you need gets smaller, but you have to move your end much farther. There's a trade-off. Why? Push it further. What if the fulcrum is right at the load, at your hand? The formula breaks down in interesting ways. This kind of play isn't wasting time. This is how understanding deepens. You're exploring the boundaries of an idea, seeing where it works and where it fails, building intuition that no amount of memorization can provide. Here's something profound about how the mind actually works. It doesn't store information in neat, labeled boxes. It stores connections, patterns, relationships. When you play with an idea, when you connect it to other things you know, when you look at it from different angles, you're building a web of associations. And that web is what makes knowledge retrievable and useful. Think about someone who's genuinely skilled in mathematics. They don't just know formulas. They see relationships. They recognize patterns. They can approach a new problem and think, this reminds me of that other thing. Maybe I can use a similar approach. That ability doesn't come from memorization. It comes from playing with ideas until the connections become natural. The fourth principle, simplify ruthlessly. There's a test for whether you understand something. Can you explain it simply? Not with jargon, not with complex terminology, but in plain words that anyone could grasp. Complexity is often a mask for confusion. When someone explains something using lots of technical terms and elaborate constructions, it's frequently because they don't really understand it themselves. They're hiding behind the language. Real understanding strips away the unnecessary complexity. It gets to the core of what's actually happening. Take the concept of entropy. In textbooks, it's described with statistical mechanics and thermodynamic equations. But what is it really? It's the universe's tendency toward disorder. A drop of ink spreads through water because there are vastly more ways for the molecules to be spread out than concentrated. That's it. That's the fundamental idea. The mathematics describes it precisely, yes, but the core concept is simple. When you're learning something, keep asking, what's the simple version? What's really going on here beneath all the fancy language? If you can't find the simple explanation, you probably don't understand it yet. This doesn't mean everything can be reduced to a sentence. Some ideas are genuinely complex, but every complex idea is built from simpler components. Break it down, find those components, understand each piece, then rebuild. Now, here's what's really happening when you train your mind this way. You're not just learning specific facts or techniques, you're changing how your brain processes information. The brain is remarkably plastic. It physically changes based on how you use it. When you practice active reconstruction instead of passive reading, you're building stronger neural pathways. When you test yourself, you're strengthening recall mechanisms. When you play with ideas, you're creating connections. When you simplify, you're organizing information in more efficient patterns. But there's something deeper still. You're developing what might be called intellectual independence. Most people are taught to trust authorities, to accept what the textbook says, to memorize what the teacher explains. But understanding requires skepticism, not stubborn denial of facts, but healthy questioning. Why should this be true? How do we know this? What evidence supports it? What would prove it wrong? This skeptical mindset is crucial. It forces you to actually think about what you're learning instead of just accepting it. And remarkably, this skepticism often leads to deeper understanding than blind acceptance ever could. Consider any scientific principle you've learned. Don't just accept it because it's in a book. Think about the evidence. What observations led to this conclusion? What experiments tested it? Are there alternative explanations? Understanding the path to knowledge is often more valuable than the knowledge itself. This isn't about rejecting established science. It's about understanding why it's established, what makes it reliable, where the boundaries of our knowledge lie. Let's bring this down to practical application. Suppose you're studying physics, trying to understand Newton's laws of motion. Here's what the untrained approach looks like. Read the laws, memorize them, practice plugging numbers into formulas, pass the test, forget everything in 6 months. Here's what the trained approach looks like. Start with the first law. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by a force. Don't just read it. Close your eyes and picture it. A puck sliding on ice keeps going until friction stops it. But what if there were no friction? It would keep going forever. Why? Because there's nothing to stop it. That's not obvious from everyday experience where everything slows down. But in space, objects do keep moving. The law suddenly makes sense. Now, test yourself. Without looking, can you state the law? Can you explain why it seems wrong in daily life, but is actually true? Can you give examples? Now play with it. What about circular motion? An object moving in a circle is constantly changing direction. Does that violate the first law? No, because changing direction requires a force. The string pulling the object inward, or gravity pulling a planet toward the sun. The law still holds. Now, simplify it. What's the core idea? Things keep doing what they're doing unless something makes them change. That's inertia. That's the fundamental insight. Do this with every concept. Make it your own. Don't be satisfied with memorization. Demand understanding. Or suppose you're reading history, the fall of the Roman Empire. The untrained mind reads about dates, emperors, battles, memorizes key facts, forgets them quickly. The trained mind asks different questions. What were the underlying causes? Economic, political, military? How did they interact? Could the fall have been prevented? What patterns appear here that show up in other civilizations? How do we actually know what happened so long ago? What evidence exists? What's speculation? This deeper questioning transforms history from a list of facts to memorize into a fascinating puzzle to understand. And paradoxically, this approach makes the facts easier to remember because they're connected to understanding rather than floating in isolation. The same principles apply to learning a language, understanding music, studying mathematics, mastering a craft, active reconstruction, brutal self-testing, playful exploration, ruthless simplification. These aren't specific to one field. They're how the mind learns anything deeply. But here's the beautiful part. As you practice these techniques, something remarkable happens. Learning becomes easier. Not because the material gets simpler, but because your mind becomes stronger. You develop mental tools that work across domains. You build confidence in your ability to figure things out. You stop being afraid of difficult material because you know how to break it down and understand it. This is what people mistake for genius. It's not some innate gift, it's a trained skill. The difference between someone who seems brilliant and someone who struggles isn't the brain they were born with, it's how they've learned to use that brain. Think about the implications of this. If understanding is a skill you can develop, then the limits on what you can learn are far broader than most people imagine. That subject that seems impossibly difficult, it's probably just being approached wrong. Those people who seem naturally talented, they've probably just developed better learning strategies, often without even realizing it. The tragedy is that most educational systems teach the exact opposite of what actually works. They reward memorization. They discourage questioning. They present knowledge as finished facts to be absorbed, rather than ideas to be rebuilt and understood. They create the illusion that learning means hearing information, when real learning means transforming information into understanding. You can break free from this. You can train your mind. Start small. Pick one thing you're trying to learn right now. Apply these principles. Close the book and try to explain it. Test yourself ruthlessly. Play with the ideas. Simplify them to their core. It will be uncomfortable at first. You'll discover how much you don't actually understand. That's good. That discomfort is the feeling of real learning happening. That's your brain being challenged to actually think rather than just absorb. Stay with it. Build the habit. Make this how you approach everything you learn and watch what happens over time. Understanding compounds. Connections multiply. The mind strengthens. There's a profound satisfaction in genuine understanding that memorization can never provide. It's the difference between carrying someone else's conclusion and discovering the truth yourself. It's the difference between knowing that something is true and understanding why it must be true. This is available to anyone. It's not reserved for the gifted few. It's simply a matter of training your mind to work the way it was meant to work, actively building understanding rather than passively collecting information. The universe is knowable. Reality follows patterns we can comprehend. The laws of nature, the structure of mathematics, the flow of history, the logic of language, all of it can be understood by a mind willing to do the work of understanding. So here's the challenge. Stop asking whether you're smart enough. Start asking whether you're thinking deeply enough. The genius you admire in others, it's not magic, it's method. And that method can be learned. Your mind is more powerful than you've been taught to believe. Train it properly, and there's almost no limit to what you can understand. What if the greatest obstacle to mastering anything isn't lack of talent, time, or resources? What if it's something far more subtle, a trap built into the very way most people think about learning itself? A peculiar phenomenon that happens when someone believes they understand something. The mind relaxes. It stops questioning. It moves on. And yet, if you were to ask that person to explain what they just learned in their own words, without relying on the exact phrases from the textbook, something remarkable happens. The supposed understanding crumbles. The words are there, but the meaning isn't. This isn't a flaw in intelligence, it's a flaw in method. And it's everywhere. Walk into any classroom. Rarely, anywhere people are trying to learn difficult aren't immediately obvious. Most people never reach this depth because they don't stay with any single problem long enough. They get uncomfortable with not having an immediate answer, so they move on to something easier, or they get interrupted and lose the thread entirely. Either way, they stay forever on the surface. The irony is that the surface is where everyone else is working too. So if you stay there, you're competing with everyone. Your work looks like everyone else's work. Your solutions are the same solutions everyone else finds. There's no advantage to be gained. But go deeper, stay focused longer, and you're suddenly in territory where few people ever venture. Not because it's forbidden or difficult to access, but simply because it requires sustained attention. And most people don't give themselves permission to work that way. This is where the compound effects start to appear. Each time you solve a problem at depth, you build intuition about how those kinds of problems work. The next time you face something similar, you start deeper than you did before. Over months and years, this adds up. You develop a way of seeing problems that others don't have. This isn't about being smarter. It's about being willing to sit with difficulty long enough to see through it. Anyone can develop this capacity. It just requires protecting your focus consistently. You give your brain extended time with a single problem, something different becomes possible. After the first 30 minutes, you exhaust the obvious approaches. After 60 minutes, you start seeing patterns that weren't visible before. After 90 minutes, if you're really focused, you sometimes reach a state where the problem starts revealing its own structure. This is where the interesting work lives. Not in the first answer that comes to mind, but in the fifth or sixth attempt after you've tried the simple approaches and found them wanting. That's when you have to actually think, when you have to look at the problem from angles that aren't immediately obvious. Most people never reach this depth because they don't stay with any single problem long enough. They get uncomfortable with not having an immediate answer, so they tasking, just you and the problem. Work until you get tired or stuck completely. No half attention, no checking other things, no else, not forever, just for the next 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, focus completely. Something where progress would actually change things. Then clear away everything else, not forever, just for the next 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, focus completely. No half attention, no checking other things, no multitasking. Just you and the problem. Work until you get tired or stuck, whichever comes first. Don't push past that point. The tired brain doesn't produce good work. It produces work that you'll have to redo. When you stop, really stop. Go for a walk. Make something to eat. Do anything that requires no significant mental effort. Don't feel guilty about this. This is part of the work. During this time, your brain is consolidating, connecting, preparing for the next session. Then, and only then, come back for another focused session. With a fresh brain, the problem often looks different. Solutions that weren't visible before become obvious. Approaches that seemed impossibly complex become manageable. Do this pattern twice, maybe 3 times in a day, and you'll accomplish more than most people do in a week of scattered effort. Not because you worked longer, but because you worked with purpose and with an understanding of how the brain actually functions. The people who seem impossibly productive aren't superhuman. They're not more disciplined or more motivated. They've just figured out this pattern, consciously or unconsciously. They protect their focus. They work on one thing at a time. They take real breaks, and they trust that the brain will do its job if they give it the right conditions. There's one more crucial piece to this. You have to become comfortable with leaving things undone. Not important things. Those get your focused attention. But all the small tasks, the administrative details, the things that could be done but don't really matter, these have to wait. This is harder than it sounds. We're taught deliberately, these are the only things that matter today. Everything else system shuts down. The solution is counterintuitive. Instead of trying to do everything, explicitly decide that most things won't get done today. Pick one, maybe two, genuinely important problems. Tell yourself clearly and deliberately, these are the only things that matter today. Everything else can wait. The brain needs this. It needs to know where to allocate resources. Once you give it clear priorities, something remarkable happens. All that worry about the other tasks fades away. The brain stops spending energy maintaining those other mental states, and suddenly you have much more capacity available for the actual work. But here's the crucial part. Those one or two tasks have to be real work, not administrative shuffling. Real work means grappling with problems that don't have obvious solutions. Writing something new, figuring out why an experiment failed, designing something that's never been designed.
I think more unfortunate than to have soft, chubby, fat-looking children who go to watch their school play basketball every Saturday and regard that as their week's exercise. I hope that all of you will join, and everybody in the United States, to make sure that our children participate fully in a vigorous and adventurous life which is possible for them in this very rich country of ours.
It would be mentally, spiritually, emotionally, patriotically healthy.
I welcome this opportunity to speak to the people of America about a subject which I believe to be most important, and that is the subject of physical fitness. And I speak not only as President of the United States, but also as a parent of two children who I hope will grow up with those qualities of vigor and energy which we identify with the best of America. This should be a matter of concern to us all. A country is as strong really as its citizens. And I think that mental and physical health, mental and physical vigor go hand. I hope that we will not find a day in the United States when all of us are spectators except for a few who are out on the field. I hope all Americans will be on the field. This is a subject which should be of interest to us all. And I hope when we have seen the astonishing results which we have seen, where we've been able in the short space of 2 and 3 months to change the physical habits and strength of our children, that this will spread to every school district in the United States. That all of us will participate, and in so doing will be better citizens and happier ones. This is a challenge for us all. Children, boys and girls, college students, mothers and fathers. And all of us, I think, should welcome it. I hope all of you will join in a great national effort to build a strong and better America through physical effort and through the contributions we can make by the drive and force we bring to our daily lives. Thank you.
Each fraction of your day, just loading and unloading mental states. The really productive people, they don't do this. They work on one thing, maybe two if they're related, for as long as the problem demands. They let the brain build up a full, rich model of the problem space. And once that model is built, the brain can do something remarkable. It can work on the problem even when you're not consciously thinking about it. You've experienced this. You work hard on something, get stuck, go for a walk, and suddenly the solution appears. That's not magic. That's the brain continuing to process in the background. But it can only do this if you've given it enough focused time to build the model in the first place. Here's the second principle. Real work happens in bursts, not in steady streams. Every available mental resource on that single problem. Then stop. Completely stop. Do something that requires no mental effort at all. What happens during that break is critical. The brain reviews what just happened. It strengthens the important connections and weakens the irrelevant ones. It finds patterns you didn't consciously notice. When you come back to the work, you're not just rested, you actually understand the problem better than you did before the break. Now here's where it gets interesting. The third principle: the brain is remarkably good at knowing what's important, but only if you let it. There's a natural filtering system that sorts problems by urgency and significance. But this system gets overridden when you try to force everything to be equally important.
Together piece. Can't remember in my entire life a more patriotic time than the Second World War. We children gathered together pieces of tinfoil from the lining of cigarette packages, about the only place you could get tinfoil in those days, aluminum foil, watered it up into balls and took them to school so they could use it to make bombers. We collected the bacon grease from cooking meat in the kitchen and took it to school in cans because it had some application to making bullets. We collected newspapers for the same reason. The Boy Scouts during the Second World War took it as their special responsibility to collect the fibers that come off milkweed with its little ball that blows away, because it was used in place of kapok to line life vests for sailors. They collected 500,000 tons of milkweed fluff in the course of the war. We were all consumed with winning this thing, which didn't seem to be a certain thing at all, as I said earlier, before around 1943. And in that world, even though, of course, there was a black market and people got to see a farmer and pick up some steaks, so they didn't have to live on some more macaroni and cheese for the next month, as we all did. But despite those changes, people were very, very patriotic and fought in every way we could to win the war.
Speaking of elder